Mount Washington is the highest peak in the northeastern United States at 6,288 ft and the most prominent mountain east of the Mississippi River. It is famous for dangerously erratic weather. For 76 years, until 2010, a weather observatory on the summit held the record for the highest wind gust directly measured at the Earth's surface, 231 mph, on the afternoon of April 12, 1934. Before European settlers arrived, the mountain was known as Agiocochook, or Home of the Great Spirit. The mountain is located in the Presidential Range of the White Mountains, in the township of Sargent's Purchase, Coos County, New Hampshire. While nearly the whole mountain is in the White Mountain National Forest, an area of 59 acres surrounding and including the summit is occupied by Mount Washington State Park. History: the first European to mention the mountain was Giovanni da Verrazzano. Viewing it from the Atlantic Ocean in 1524, he described what he saw as high interior mountains. The Abenaki people inhabiting the region at the time of European contact believed that the tops of mountains were the dwelling place of the gods, and so among other reasons did not climb them out of religious deference to their sanctity. Darby Field claimed to have made the first ascent of Mt. Washington in 1642. Field climbed the mountain in June of that year to demonstrate to the Abenaki chief Pasakonaway that the Europeans bargaining for tribal land were not subject to the gods believed to inhabit the summit, a primarily political move that facilitated colonists' northern expansion. Field again summited Agiocochook in October 1642 on an early surveying expedition that created maps of land as far as Maine, maps which assisted the delegations from the Massachusetts colony seeking to acquire the more arable coastal regions. A geology party, headed by Manasseh Cutler, named the mountain in 1784. The Crawford Path, the oldest mountain hiking trail in the United States, was laid out in 1819 as a bridle path from Crawford Notch to the summit and has been in use ever since. Ethan Allen Crawford built a house on the summit in 1821, which lasted until a storm in 1826. Little occurred on the summit itself until the mid-19th century, when it was developed into one of the first tourist destinations in the nation, with construction of more bridle paths and 2 hotels. The Summit House opened in 1852, a 64-foot-long stone hotel anchored by 4 heavy chains over its roof. In 1853, the tip-top house was erected to compete. Rebuilt of wood with 91 rooms in 1872 to 1873, the Summit House burned in 1908, then was replaced in granite in 1915. The tip-top house alone survived the fire. Today it is a state historic site, recently renovated for exhibits. Other Victorian-era tourist attractions included a coach Rawada Euro, now the Mount Washington Auto Rawada Euro, and the Mount Washington Cog Railway, both of which are still in operation. For 40 years, an intermittent daily newspaper, called Among the Clouds, was published by Henry M. Burt at the summit each summer, until 1917. Copies were circulated via the Cog Railway and coaches to surrounding hotels and other outlets. In November 2010, it was revealed that Orlando, Florida-based CNL Financial, which owns the Mount Washington Hotel at the foot of the mountain, had formally filed to trademark the Mount Washington name. CNL officials said they were directing their efforts against other hotels that use the mountain's name and not the numerous businesses in the area that use it. CNL's application at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office seeks registration of the trademark Mount Washington for any retail service, any restaurant service, and any entertainment service. Climate. The summit station of Mount Washington has an alpine climate or tundra climate, although it receives an extremely high amount of precipitation, atypical for most regions with such cold weather. Lower elevations have a subarctic climate. The weather of Mount Washington is notoriously erratic. This is partly due to the convergence of several storm tracks, mainly from the Atlantic to the south, the Gulf region and Pacific Northwest. The vertical rise of the Presidential Range, combined with its north-south orientation, makes it a significant barrier to westerly winds. Low-pressure systems are more favorable to develop along the coastline in the winter months due to the relative temperature differences between the Northeast and the Atlantic Ocean. With these factors combined, winds exceeding hurricane force occur an average of 110 days per year. From November to April, these strong winds are likely to occur during two-thirds of the days. Mount Washington once held the world record and still holds the Northern Hemisphere and Western Hemisphere record for directly measured surface wind speed, at 231 mph per hour, recorded on the afternoon of April 12, 1934. Measurements indicate that Cyclone Olivia surpassed this record in 1996. The first regular meteorological observations on Mount Washington were conducted by the U.S. Signal Service, a precursor of the National Weather Service, from 1870 to 1892. The Mount Washington Station was the first of its kind in the world, setting an example followed in many other countries. For many years, the record low temperature was thought to be a 47 degree Fahrenheit occurring on January 29, 1934, but upon the first in-depth examination of the data from the 19th century at NOAA's National Climatic Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina, a new record low was discovered. Mount Washington's official record low of a 50 degree Fahrenheit was recorded on January 22, 1885. However, there is also handwritten evidence to suggest that an unofficial low of a 59 degree Fahrenheit occurred on January 5, 1871. The official record cold daily maximum is a 28 degree Fahrenheit on February 6, 1995. Highs of 0 degree Fahrenheit or below occur on 13 days annually, while lows at or below 0 degree Fahrenheit can be expected from November 17 through April 1. From December to March temperatures rise above freezing on only 15 days. On January 16, 2004, the Summit Weather Observation registered a temperature of a 43.6 degree Fahrenheit and sustained winds of 87.5 mph per hour, resulting in a wind chill value of a 102.59 degree Fahrenheit at the mountain. During a 71-hour stretch from around 3 p.m. on January 13 to around 2 p.m. on January 16, 2004, the wind chill on the summit never went above a 50 degree Fahrenheit. The official record high temperature at the summit is 72 degree Fahrenheit on June 26, 2003 and August 2, 1975. While the official record warm daily minimum is 60 degree Fahrenheit on the latter date. Readings of 60 degree Fahrenheit or more at the summit are seen on an average 16 days annually. The primary summit building was designed to withstand 300 mph per hour winds. Other structures are literally chained to the mountain. In addition to a number of broadcast towers, the mountain is the site of a non-profit scientific observatory reporting the weather as well as other aspects of the subarctic climate of the mountain. The extreme environment creates strong winds and ice at the top of Mount Washington, making using unmanned equipment problematic. The observatory also conducts research, primarily the testing of new weather measurement devices. The Sherman Adams Summit Building, which houses the observatory, is closed to the public during the winter and hikers are not allowed inside the building except for emergencies and pre-arranged guided tours. The Mount Washington Observatory reoccupied the summit in 1932 through the enthusiasm of a group of individuals who recognized the value of a scientific facility at that demanding location. The observatory's weather data have accumulated into a valuable climate record since. Temperature and humidity readings have been collected using a sling psychrometer, a simple device containing two mercury thermometers. Where most unstaffed weather stations have undergone technology upgrades, consistent use of the sling psychrometer has helped provide scientific precision to the Mount Washington climate record. The observatory makes prominent use of the slogan "Home of the World's Worst Weather," a claim that originated with a 1940 article by Charles Brooks, titled "The Worst Weather in the World." Precipitation, due in part to its high prominence, to its situation at the confluence of two major storm tracks and to the north-south orientation of the presidential range ridgeline which it crowns, Mount Washington receives very high levels of precipitation, averaging an equivalent of around 96.9 in of rain per year, With a record high of 130.14 in 1969 and low of 71.34 in 1979. Monthly precipitation has ranged from 0.75 in October 1947 to 28.70 in October 2005. Large amounts of precipitation often fall in a short period of time. In October 1996, a record 11.07 in of precipitation fell during a single 24-hour period. A substantial amount of this falls as snow, with a seasonal average of around 280 inches of snow. Seasonal accumulation has ranged from 75.8 in 1947 of 48 to 566.4 in 1968 to 69. The record amount of snowfall in a 24-hour period, 49.3 in, occurred in February 1969, which is also the snowiest month on record with 172.8 in. Geographical features. Although the western slope that the Cog Railway ascends is straightforward from base to summit, the mountain's other sides are more complex. On the north side, Great Gulf the mountain's largest glacial cirque forms an amphitheater surrounded by the northern presidentials, Mounts Clay, Jefferson, Adams and Madison. These connected peaks reach well into the treeless alpine zone. Massive Chandler Ridge extends northeast from the summit of Washington to form the amphitheater's southern wall and is the incline ascended by the automobile road. East of the summit, a plateau known as the Alpine Gardens extends south from Chandler Ridge at about 5,200 feet elevation. It is notable for plant species either endemic to alpine meadows in the White Mountains or outliers of larger populations in Arctic regions far to the north. Alpine Gardens drops off precipitously into two prominent glacial cirques. Craggy Huntington Ravine offers rock and ice climbing in an alpine setting. More rounded Tuckerman Ravine is New England's premier venue for spring backcountry skiing as late as June and then a scenic hiking route. It rises about 500 meters above alpine tree line. South of the summit lies a second and larger alpine plateau, Bigelow Lawn, at 5,000 feet to 5,500 feet elevation. Satellite summit Boot Spurs and then the Montalban Ridge including Mount Isolation and Mount Davis extend south from it, while the higher southern Presidentials Mounts Monroe, Franklin, Eisenhower, Pierce, Jackson and Webster extend southwest to Crawford Notch. Oaks Gulf separates the two high ridges. Uses. The mountain is part of a popular hiking area, with the Appalachian Trail crossing the summit and one of the Appalachian Mountain Club's 8 mountain huts, the Lakes of the Clouds Hut, located on one of the mountain's shoulders. Winter recreation includes Tuckerman Ravine, famous for its Memorial Day skiing and its 45-degree slopes. The ravine is notorious for its avalanches, of which about 100 are recorded every year, and which have killed 6 people since 1849. Scores of hikers have died on the mountain in all seasons, due to harsh and rapidly changing conditions, inadequate equipment, failure to plan for the wide variety of conditions which can occur above tree line, and poor decisions once the weather becomes dangerous. The weather at Mount Washington has made it a popular site for glider flying. In 2005, it was recognized as the 14th National Landmark of Soaring. Hiking. The most popular hiking trail approach to the summit is via the 4.1-mile Tuckerman Ravine Trail. It starts at the Pinkham Notch Camp area and gains 4,280 feet, leading straight up the bowl of Tuckerman Ravine via a series of steep rock steps which afford spectacular views of the ravine and across the notch to Wildcat Mountain. Fatalities have occurred on the trail, both from ski accidents and hypothermia. Water bottles may be refilled at the base of the bowl 2.1 miles up the trail at a well pump near a small hiker's stall which offers snacks, toilets and shelter. At the summit is a center with a museum, gift shop, observation area, and cafeteria. Descent can be made by shuttle bus back to the Pinkham Notch Camp for a fee. Other routes up the eastern slopes of the mountain include the Lion Head, Boot Spurs, Huntington Ravine and Nelson Crag trails, as well as the Great Gulf Trail ascending from the northeast. Routes from the western slopes include the Ammonoosuc Ravine and Jewel Trails and the Crawford Path and Gulf Side Trail. There are many differences between climbing Mount Washington in summer and climbing it in winter. Big differences in weather and ground conditions exist, of course, but there are also significant differences in the level of amenities available to the visitor. There are no public facilities on the summit in winter. In the winter months, the most popular route is the Lionhead Winter Route, which begins on the Tuckerman Ravine Trail but then turns north to ascend up to Lionhead at elevation 5,033 feet. The winter route variation is recommended to help climbers avoid avalanche danger. Exactly where the route turns from the Tuckerman Ravine Trail depends on the snow conditions. If the amount of snowfall hasn't been significant enough yet, the Lionhead summer route may be open. After hiking 2.3 miles from the visitor center in Pinkham Notch, the trail will take a right turn onto the Lionhead summer route. If there has been enough snow accumulation on the summer Lionhead Trail, the Forest Service will open the Lionhead Winter Route, which turns off after approximately 1.7 miles. Cog Railway. Since 1869, the Mount Washington Cog Railway has provided tourists with a train journey to the summit of Mount Washington. It uses a marsh rack system and was the first successful rack railway in the U.S. Races. Every year in June, the mountain is host to the Mount Washington Road Race, an event which attracts hundreds of runners. In July the mountain is the site of Newton's Revenge and in August the Mount Washington Auto Road Bicycle Hill Climb, both of which are bicycle races that run the same route as the road race. The hill climb's most notable victor to date has been former Tour de France contender Tyler Hamilton. On August 7, 1932, Raymond E Welch, Sr., became the first one-legged man to climb Mount Washington. An official race was held and open only to one-legged people. Mr. Welch climbed the Jacob's Ladder route and descended via the carriage road. Raymond Welch had lost his leg due to a sledding injury as a 7-year-old child. At the time of his climb, Mr. Welch was the station agent for the Boston and Maine Railroad in Northumberland, New Hampshire. The mountain is also host to one of the oldest car races in the country, the Mount Washington Hill Climb Auto Race. The race has been held on and off since 1904. In September 2010, Travis Pastrana set an unofficial record at 6 minutes 20.47 seconds, driving a Vermont sports car Subaru WRXD. In June 2011, David Higgins set a new record for ascent of Mount Washington in a car, at 6:11.54, using the same model vehicle. Transmission stations. Edwin H. Armstrong installed an Fathom broadcasting station on the top of Mount Washington in 1937. The station stopped operating in 1948, due to excessive maintenance costs. In 1954 a TV tower and transmitters were installed for WMTW, Channel 8, licensed to Poland Spring, Maine. The station continuously broadcast from the top of the mountain, including local forecasts by WMTW transmitter engineer Marty Engstrom. WMTW continually broadcast from the mountaintop until 2002. Mount Washington continued FM broadcasting in 1958 with the construction of WMTW FM 94.9, which became WHOOM in 1976. WHOOM and WMTW TV shared a transmitter building, which also housed the generators to supply power to the mountain. On February 9, 2003, a fire destroyed the transmitter building and the generators, which at the time still had WHOOM's transmitters inside it. WHOOM subsequently built a new transmitter building on the site of the old power building, and also constructed a new standby antenna on the Armstrong Tower. In 1987, WHOOM and WMTW were joined on the peak of the mountain by WMOU-FM on a separate tower. Steve Powell, owner and president of New England Broadcasting, had the tower for WZPK built higher than the other structures on the summit. It became the highest point east of the Mississippi and north of the Carolinas. The WPKQ transmitters are located in the back of the Yankee Building. Due to the extreme weather on Mount Washington, both WHOOM and WPKQ use specially designed FM antennas which are housed in special cylindrical radomes, manufactured by Shively Labs of nearby Bridgeton, Maine. The National Weather Service Forecast Office in Gray, Maine operates a NOAA weather radio station KZZ-41 on 162.5 MHz from the summit of Mount Washington. Due to its point as the highest elevation in the Northeast and the frequency range NWR broadcasts on, the station can be heard at very far distances. It has been heard in northwest Vermont. Based on the official NWS coverage area map, it can be heard clearly throughout most of New Hampshire, western Maine, northeast Vermont and portions of southern Canada. During very clear conditions, KZZ-41 has the potential to reach the majority of northern Massachusetts as well as the majority of Vermont and Maine. In June 2008, the possibility of television returning to Mount Washington came to light, with the filing by New Hampshire Public Television to move WLED-TV from its current location near Littleton to the old WMTW mast on top. Deaths. Since 1849, over 135 people have died on Mount Washington and other peaks in the Presidential Range. William Buckingham Curtis, often called the father of American amateur athletics after his death, died on June 30, 1900 during a snowstorm. Artistic tributes. Mount Washington has been the subject of several famous paintings, part of a New England school of art known as White Mountain art. Inspired by the Hudson River School of Landscape Painting, a number of artists during the Victorian era ventured into the White Mountains in search of natural subjects. Conway became their base, first arriving by coach and boarding at farmhouses, then in the 1870s by train to newly opened inns and hotels. They created a flood of paintings that found their way around the world, most notably to Hampton Court. The interest their works generated attracted others to visit Mount Washington and the region, initiating the tourism business that remains vital today. Musical tributes have also been made, such as Symphony No. A64, Op. A422, composed around 1990 by the American composer Alan Hovhaness, dedicated to Mount Washington, which the composer climbed during his youth. See also: Outline of New Hampshire, Index of New Hampshire-related articles, List of U.S. states by elevation, Mountain peaks of North America, Mountain peaks of the United States, List of ultras of North America, List of ultras of the United States, Notes. References. External links: Mount Washington Observatory, Mount Washington Cog Railway, Mount Washington Auto Road, Tips for hiking Mount Washington, Current trail conditions on and around Mount Washington, 19th-century paintings of Mount Washington, computer-generated summit panoramas north-southwest to Adirondack Group Index, National Geographic, Mount Washington, Backyard Arctic, Housecam view of Mount Washington.